Madame Fangfang, who is here to introduce her memoir, Galloping Horses, Artist Xu Beihong and His Family in Mao's China. You have seen Madame Fangfang's background. She was born and raised in China, then moved to USA, studied at University of California in Berkeley, did her MBA from Stanford University. Then she was founding director of the music department at Renmin University in China. But she has also devoted a whole lot of time to research her very famous father Xu Beihong's life, work, and legacy. Xu Beihong is possibly one of the best known Chinese artists. I had the pleasure of visiting Xu Beihong Museum in Beijing a number of occasions, and also meeting Madame Fangfang's mother, Madame Liao Qingwan, who was at that time director of the museum. Xu Beihong, as you are aware, had a very strong India connection also. He came to Shantiniketan in 1939 at the invitation of Rabindranath Tagore as a visiting professor at Kala Bhavan in Shantiniketan. Spent about a year in Shantiniketan, and he not only carried back with him a strong imprint of his stay in India, but also left behind a very strong influence on very famous artists like Nandal Bose, who were working in Shantiniketan at that time. I was discussing with Madame Fangfang a short while ago, and some of the most iconic art creations of Xu Beihong, in fact, have this India connection. Possibly his best known oil painting, Yukun Ishan, Foolish Old Man Moves Mountain, which has been restored and also kept at the Xu Beihong Museum. The first, at that time it was ink wash that was, I think, was done in India during his stay in India, and he went back and then did this very large oil painting. Likewise, he's best known in China and internationally for galloping horses. And I understand that while he started painting horses while he was in China before he came to India, but the galloping horses underwent a transformation following his stay in India. So Bob was just telling me that the legs became longer and the galloping horses was really born more active, more vigorous, and that was something again, influence of his India sojourn. Then again, this is something I heard when I was in China. Xuanyu, his water buffalo, again very well-known painting of Xu Beihong. The water buffalo there is the Indian buffalo, not the Chinese buffalo. So the number of these connections are there. He spent time in Darjeeling and Kalimpong also, and there are some very well-known paintings dating back to that period. So we have with us, Madame Fangfang talking about her memoir, Galloping Horses. Thank you very much for coming to India. She's traveling to Shantiniketan this coming Sunday. She'll spend some time doing research at Shantiniketan, and she'll also visit Darjeeling, a place which is reflected in the body of work of Xu Beihong. Over to you, Madame Xu.
Thank you for introducing me. Ladies and gentlemen, respected guests, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to hear my talk. I want to first thank Dr. Ashok Ken for the opportunity to share my understanding of Xu Beihong's art and also my memoir, Galloping Horses. artist Xu Beihong and his family in Mao's China. I also had very warm feelings about India. I came here to continue the journey that my father started in 1939, where he received very warm support by the Indian people at that time during his exhibition and his residence in Saint Nectan. I also want to renew the friendship that my father established between the Indian people and the Chinese people. Let me just say a few words about Xu Beihong's background. The most influential Chinese artist and art educator in 20th century China, Xu Beihong is widely known as the father of modern Chinese painting. Born in 1895 into a poor family in southern China in Yixing, Jiangsu Province, Xu Beihong first studied traditional Chinese ink brush painting and also Chinese classics from his father, a self-taught artist. Xu Beihong gained a government scholarship to study in France and attended the world-famous art school, the École de Beaux Arts in Paris. Between 1919 and 1927, he studied oil painting and sketching in several European countries. With the knowledge he gained in Europe, he successfully integrated Western painting methods and technique with traditional Chinese painting in order to develop Chinese painting. Xu Beihong demonstrated two fundamental ways to improve Chinese painting. The first, focusing on human activities. The second is rejuvenating the tradition of learning from nature. Xu Beihong's creative works and his extensive teaching offered Chinese artists and art educators a new direction. Yeah, I think you can turn off the light. Xu Beihong is very well known for his ink brush painting of galloping horses, as in his other animal paintings. He expressed his sorrows and joys, as well as his hopes for a brighter future for his country. On his galloping horse, created in 1941 in Penang, Malaya, Xu Beihong inscribed, "I'm very concerned about the Second Battle of Changsha." As you know, ancient Chinese painting usually show plump, groomed, and tamed horses, painted in fine detail. But Xu Beihong used a large Chinese brush to portray lean, anatomically strong galloping horses filled with fire and spirit, based on accurate Western sketching principles. Just going to say a few words about about this galloping horse. As you can see, that the legs are exaggerated to be longer than those of real horses. Yet these lean and long legs look natural. These features, in addition to the use of shortening in the body of the horse make this galloping horse dynamic. Let me say a few words about Xu Beihong's experience with the horses in India. In India, Xu Beihong, in 1940, Xu Beihong rode horses on the plains near Darjeeling. He even traveled long distance to Kashmir on horseback, spending day and night with the horses that he loved so much since his childhood. He came to better understand the temperament of these animals. The horses in India struck Xu Beihong as special, graceful, sturdy, with long necks, long, steely hoofed legs, strong chest muscles, pointed ears, broad noses, and fine coats with a silken sheen. After his experience with this type of horse in India, the horses he painted exhibit noticeably greater vigor. Xu Beihong came to Shantiniketan, India, in December 1939 at the invitation of Rabindranath Tagore, where he held an exhibition, and he held another exhibition in Calcutta the next year. As you know, Rabindranath Tagore established the visual Bharati to make it possible so that students could study all the elements of Eastern civilization in one place. Tagore had been very interested in Chinese art, that he had visited China in 1924, accompanied by artist Nantalal Bose, head of the Beihong. Tagore admired Xu Beihong's art. He wrote the following introduction to Xu Beihong's exhibition in Calcutta. He said, "Beauty's language." Here, my understanding is that beauty here means beauty has its unique language. So that's why he said, "Beauty's language is unique and yet varied in its accent. In rhythmic line and color, China's great artist Xu Beihong has offered us an immemorial vision without sacrificing the regional and the unique, which have met in his own experience. I welcome this exhibition of Xu Beihong's paintings. I have enjoyed them profoundly, and I'm sure that our art lovers will derive rich inspiration from them. Words are intruders, where significant form demands its own recognition. So I lift the screen of speech to usher the spectators to a feast of rare loveliness." Tagore also said in his welcome speech that was published in Visual Bharati News in February 1940. "We welcome you as a messenger of China's great culture. You have brought to us in India the gift of spiritual sympathy, which centuries ago united our ancient humanities. China and India shared the dawn of a great renaissance. And even in these days of political cataclysm, the memory light of that comradeship remains." Tagore also said, "You have come to us with the vision of art, with the sensitive appeal of truth, which must triumph over rude shocks of circumstance. Your visit will strengthen us and bring our effort nearer to fulfillment. With great joy, I look forward to an era of warm kinship between our neighboring lands and to the assertion of historical forces in the East that will save us from the encroaching darkness. In reply, Beihong said, Saint-Nictan is a place which corresponds to my ideal of a center of art and culture. The whole world should make a pilgrimage here in order to breathe the joyful atmosphere of creative endeavor undertaken here under the direct inspiration of India's great poet. My visit here is that of pilgrim. I've come not to give, but to receive the great gifts that India may have to bestow upon my country and people, as she did in the days gone by. As the most influential Chinese painter and teacher, Beihong came to Saint-Nictan as the first Chinese visiting professor to Vishwabharati. The school there had been eager to get a broad view of Chinese art. Beihong lectured and demonstrated Chinese inkbrush paintings and calligraphy to Kala Bhavana students. He painted there every day, and the students and art teachers would gather around him and watch him paint. That's what I was told. And I believe that several of the students were influenced by him, including the later students, not at that time. Hussein, I was told, also was influenced by him. Hussein went to China and met my father in early 1950s. Another purpose of Beihong's sojourn in India was to gain public support for China's war of resistance against Japan, which was still in its most difficult stage. Beihong donated the entire process from the exhibitions in India to help alleviate the suffering of refugees driven from their homes in Japanese-occupied areas. During Beihong's sojourn in India, besides observing cultural activities and the magnificent landscape of the Himalaya and Darjeeling, which are reflected in his works, Beihong interacted with Indian people, also with outstanding cultural figures, including Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi. These experiences enabled Beihong to create, during his years of residence there, a great number of masterpieces that exemplify the pinnacle of his artistic career. I want to show you this portrait of Rabindranath Tagore. This is one of Beihong's representative portraits from life, representative inkbrush portrait from life. Beihong did quite a few sketches while he was in Saint-Nictan in order to create this portrait in inkbrush. The accomplishment of this inkbrush portrait from life is comparable to that of a Western oil portrait from life, which shows the artist's perception and skills of painting from life. Here you can see that the artist chose to portray Tagore's eyes in detail. He was gazing into the distance as if he were composing poetry. His hands, one holding a notebook, the other a pen, reflected the poet's creative moment. The thick foliage in the background sets off the poet lost in thought. I don't know. Is it working? I don't think. Oh, it is working.
It's working.
Call your attention to the two little birds that perch on the branch, suggest a tranquil atmosphere. And the line drawing here, that is typical Chinese English painting, yet his lines convey a sense of volume. Such a ink-brush portrait from life, portraying an individual's facial expression, revealing a facial expression, and capturing his creative moment, was unique in Chinese ink-brush painting at the time it was done. By the way, there is another portrait of Tagore, also in ink brush. Currently, it is in a collection of Rabindranath Bhavan in Saint-Nectan. Here is a portrait of Gandhi. Xu Beihong sketched Gandhi during a gathering in Saint-Nectan, India in 1940. He spent a few minutes to do this. But I think the artist was able to capture Gandhi's character with his simple, direct, unadorned expressions. I believe that Xu Beihong had some understanding of Gandhi's character. He wrote an article which was published in a Singapore newspaper in Chinese. In that article, he said, "Today I had the honor of meeting a man who carries with him the soul of all India." I also would like to tell you something about Xu Beihong's teaching and drawing. He encouraged his students to portray selective details while maintaining a sense of the whole. And this drawing, even if though done so simply, so in a sketch, it exemplified his teaching of portraying selected details while maintaining a sense of the whole. Xu Beihong's artworks have moved the hearts of many people throughout the world. I believe that human feelings and Chinese aesthetics touch the hearts of many people. Xu Beihong wanted his artworks to achieve the goal of appealing to divine powers on behalf of humanity. His seal, appeal to divine powers with the sincerest of feelings, indicates the standard that he wished his artworks to achieve. The Foolish Old Man Who Removed the Mountains, created in 1940 in India, is such an example. Xu Beihong actually did 3 paintings of this same subject. I believe that he did the this ink brush painting first, and then he did 2 oil paintings. One oil study, and the other is a large oil painting. The compositions are slightly different, the oil versus the Chinese ink brush. This painting's theme came from a popular Chinese fable recorded in the Chinese classic Liezi. The fable tells of a man called Foolish Old Man who was determined to remove from his doorway 2 mountains blocking a view from his doorway. He believed that this formidable task could be accomplished by generations of his descendants. Here the painting depicts the invisible spirit of the Chinese people, whom Beihong believed would win the war of resistance if they persevered, as had the foolish old man and his descendants. This painting broke new grounds in Chinese ink brush painting. With its large-scale nude figures dominating the composition, the portrayal of these figures incorporates Western sketching techniques. I want to show you one of the drawings that he did. In fact, he did dozens of drawings, live figure, to create this large Chinese ink brush painting, which is about 13 feet long. It's very hard to do. I believe that each figure that he had a live model. And he chose this cook. This person is a cook in the school dining hall. And Beihong appreciated the figure, the strength in his body. So he did like a dozen of this figure drawing. And the cook was very willing to model for him whenever he needed. In fact, in February and March last year, the Beihong Memorial Museum had a large exhibition of over 200 paintings in Beijing's major art museum, National Museum of Art, showing more than like 2,000 drawings leading up to the Foolish Old Man painting. And there were quite a few of this cook being displayed there. And the students, many Chinese students were at the site imitating the drawing, this particular drawing. Well, I think that there's a point I want to raise, that Beihong believed that 2,000 years ago, Chinese people and Indian people, they may be intermingled at that time. So this fable is a Chinese fable, but he showed Indian figures. That question was raised by people in China, but my father said, 2,000 years ago, I believe that the people could look this way. What he said. Beihong had deep feelings about water buffalo. This is this painting portrays a peaceful scene, so typical of Beihong's childhood. At the time, his family had a small watermelon plot, but did not have a buffalo. Beihong helped graze the water buffalo that belonged to his neighbor, who allowed him to use the water buffalo when he needed to plow the family melon plot. Later in his life, water buffalo and buffalo herdsmen became one of his favorite subjects, to paint. You probably all know that in Chinese ink brush painting, calligraphy, inscription, and seals are integral parts of a traditional Chinese painting. Here I'm showing you an enlarged inscription. It says, Beihong painted this in the house of no comment from the mediocre in Nanjing. Well, at the time, Xu Beihong's efforts to improve Chinese paintings met with opposition from some traditional Chinese painters. So Xu Beihong named his house "No Comments from the Mediocre." That's his sense of humor and sarcasm. There's a seal here. You probably know that seals are usually stamped on documents or artworks to show personal signature or legitimacy on the document. Here, the seal says, "Neither in heaven nor on earth can everything be accomplished." This seal expresses the artist's feelings when he painted the painting. The memory of such a peaceful scene became a lost illusion when Chinese nation was threatened by Japanese invasion. In the field of oil painting, Xu Beihong was the first Chinese artist to achieve significant skill and apply it with creative intuition to his major works. Between 1928 and 1930, he started work on this major oil painting, Tianheng and his 500 Warriors. Tianheng was from a 3rd century BCE noble family of the state of Qi. He chose suicide rather than submission to the overwhelming forces of the Han Emperor. Upon hearing Tianheng's death, all his 500 followers also committed suicide. Here, Xu Beihong portrayed the uncompromising moral integrity, a quality that Xu Beihong believed that his country needed when confronted with national crisis, which is the looming Japanese occupation of northeast China. Xu Beihong chose this moment of Tianheng bidding a solemn farewell to his 500 followers. In fact, there were quite a few people that Xu Beihong knew very well. Here you can see the person in yellow is Xu Beihong's self-portrait. And it is Xu Beihong's friend and his students among the followers. This oil is the very first Western European style narrative history painting ever created in China. In contrast to his dramatic historical paintings, Sound of the Flute, created in 1926, is like a lyrical song. It combines classical form, romantic atmosphere, impressionist coloring, with a Chinese subject expressing a woman's feelings as she reminisces about her homeland, China. With the same skills, that Xu Beihong used to depict the inner worlds of humans. He was able to capture the momentary expressions and gestures of animals in a subtle way. His animal paintings usually express deeper meanings through the use of analogy in a subtle way. For example, Wounded Lion was created in 1938, in the beginning of China's war of resistance against Japan. At the time, China suffered heavy losses. As you know, the lion is a symbol of the Chinese nation. In this painting, the lion turns its head, its piercing eyes filled with determination to strike back at Japanese invasion. This tiger and rabbit, created in 1935, expresses the emotional interaction found in a couple's daily life. This painting was completed at the request of a friend. The birth signs of the friend and his wife were tiger and rabbit, respectively. In order to portray tiger and rabbit in the same painting, Xu Beihong chose to arrange them playing together. In the artist's clever composition, the tiger is not fierce, but mischievously submissive. This scene portrays the loving and harmonious relationship between the couple. In 1937, Xu Beihong created his famous ink brush painting, Spring Rain on the Li River. As a splash ink painting with an impressionistic result, it portrays the beautiful mountainous landscape along the Li River, dissolved in spring rain and mist. This groundbreaking painting integrates reflected light and shadow with traditional Chinese landscape. By the way, painting landscape this way was never done before. That's why I said it is a groundbreaking painting. Xu Beihong used blocks of ink and wash directly with very little line drawing. It worked very well in this to portray the atmosphere of the spring rain and mist. In this painting, Against the Wind, created in 1936, a few airborne sparrows fearlessly challenge the headwind. The stormy atmosphere is portrayed with a few brush strokes of fluttering leaves and swaying branches. As its inscription Against the Wind implies, Xu Beihong praised the spirit of resistance, as well as his firm stand in his endeavor to improve Chinese painting. Xu Beihong pioneered Chinese art education. His role as a leading art educator helped him achieve his goal of developing Chinese painting. He was the first Chinese artist to introduce the high standard Western practice of painting, sketching from life, and established sketching as the foundation for all art students in China's major art institutions. He advocated realism and held that art ought to explore what is important in people's lives. Between 1927 and 1953, when he passed away, he trained several generations of Chinese artists in his new system. Among them, many have become accomplished artists and art educators. I'm going to show you a couple of paintings by one of his best students, Li Hu, who was an accomplished Chinese landscape and figure painters. Here we can see the dynamic in the composition of Li Hu's history painting, Guangzhou Uprising. That was in 1927, this uprising, and the painting was created in the early 1950s. I want to call your attention to the concise depiction of facial expressions and strong illumination in ink brush. Here you can see the effective teaching in Li Hu's painting. You can see Xu Beihong's effective training in Li Hu's painting. After Xu Beihong passed away, his students, including Li Hu and other accomplished artists and art educators, and their students, their own students, have continued to contribute to the development of Chinese painting into the 21st century. Next, I want to briefly introduce my memoir, Galloping Horses, Artist Xu Beihong and His Family in Mao's China. This is a book cover. This is my father, my brother, Xu Qingping, and myself in our old house in 1949. By the way, the two books there, you're welcome to look through if you have time. Galloping Horses, this book describes and offers very rare glimpses of Xu Beihong's experience under Mao Zedong, and how his legacy survived the turbulence of Mao's policies from 1949 through the devastating Cultural Revolution, 10-year Cultural Revolution. As a non-Communist Party person, Xu Beihong held the highest honorable position in the new China established in 1949. He had personal connections with top leaders, including Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. But was he the real decision maker of the Central Academy of Fine Arts, or he was president? Well, some art historians claim that he was. Well, you can find out that answer from my book. As you know, in 1949, the Communist Party controlled all art institutions, including the Central Academy of Fine Arts. The party urged artists to serve workers, peasants, and soldiers, and make their creative works serve the party's policy. Xu Beihong was eager to adjust his thoughts to serve the new China, but he had difficulties. You can find the extent of the influence during this period from my book, which offered untold stories. The reason I said that is that in the West, people always thought that Xu Beihong was a red artist approved by the Chinese government and the party. And that was not the whole story. So you can find out from my book, those untold stories. You may want to know what happened to Xu Beihong's teaching programs in the 1950s, and what happened to his sketching courses that he set up for Chinese ink brush painting students. What happened to his legacy, his family during the Cultural Revolution. You will find answers or draw your own conclusions from my book, which is based on 6 years of research, including interviews with family members, particularly my mother, Xu Beihong's widow, Liao Jingwen, my other family members, classmates, colleagues, and Xu Beihong's former students. If you are interested in this book, you can find it on Amazon. It's in print form and also in ebook Kindle, also in 2 languages. I have the ebook in Chinese. Here's Amazon. So if you go to book purchase, it will take you to the printed form. Okay, and here is, if you want to read Chinese, here's a Chinese ebook. 奔腾的骏马，画家徐悲鸿和他的家人在毛泽东的中国。E-form is traditional Chinese. There are more than 90 high-quality images of Xu Beihong's paintings on my website, so you can download any. You can click oil painting, Chinese painting, drawings in any category, and it will pull up more than a dozen of them. Here is oil painting. Here is a view of the morning of Himalayas that Xu Beihong painted while he visited Darjeeling and journeyed up the Himalayas on horseback. That he even wrote on one of his ink brush painting of the Himalayas. He wrote the name Kanchin Janga in ink brush. In my book, my stories includes first accounts of the complicated power struggle at the top from the 1950s through the 1970s. Mao's ever-changing policies dictated the direction of art and music from 1949 through the devastating 10-year Cultural Revolution, dramatically altering the fate of many artists and musicians. Therefore, the detailed descriptions of their lives make this book an alternative history of this period. In fact, Xu Beihong's legacy experienced ups and downs a few times during these years, depending on when he was in or out of favor. Galloping Horses is the first book in English written by the children of a major Chinese artist, and also the first in English about his family, particularly his widow Liao Jingwen, whose dedication had made the Xu Beihong Memorial Museum possible after her late husband's passing in 1953. My father had a wish, which was to establish a public art museum of China's artistic heritage. To honor his wish, my mother donated more than 1,200 of his original sketches, drawings, oil paintings, and Chinese ink brush paintings. She also donated Xu Beihong's entire personal collection of more than 1,000 masterpieces by Chinese and foreign artists. Her decision assured that this collection of works by Xu Beihong would be the largest and the best in the world, and would display permanently. Here's the website, beihongchinaarts.com. If you don't have the website, you can pick up a card from me, which has all that information. You can look up the website. Here's the Xu Beihong Memorial Museum that was reopened in 1983 in a new location. The photo was taken in 1985 with my mother in the middle. And here's a visiting professor from Stanford and his wife in front of my father's statue in the new museum location. Here is a photo taken last year of the new expanded museum. The Memorial Museum is currently closed when it undergoes a major expansion. The outside is finished, but inside interior has not. I want to say a few words about the Cultural Revolution. Some of you may or may not know that the Cultural Revolution that took place between 1966 and 1967 is a sensitive subject in the People's Republic of China now. I want to make sure that you understand that my talk today about the Cultural Revolution is strictly for the learning of this period in history, with no intended influence to the current political policy or people in power. As you know, in 1966, when the Cultural Revolution broke out, most famous professors, musicians, or artists were considered bourgeois academic authority to be struck down. Although Xu Beihong is works expressed patriotism during China's war of resistance against Japan, they did not explicitly support Mao's position in 1966, which was one of the strict ideological standards that all works of art, music, drama, and their creators had to meet. In the Cultural Revolution, there were opportunists who took advantage of the chaos to get back at their personal or political enemies, but there were also good people, including government leaders and cutters. For example, Premier Zhou Enlai was my father's longtime friend, whom he had met during his student years in Paris. At several critical moments, including the Cultural Revolution, my mother appealed to Premier Zhou Enlai, and each time Premier Zhou Enlai responded to her request like a trusted friend. He helped my immediate family survive the Cultural Revolution intact. Many of our artist friends did not. In 1966, the Xu Beihong Memorial Museum was closed and later demolished to build the subway stations. In August 1966, here is a photograph of my mother in 1940, when they They were about to get married at that time. It's mid-1940s. In August 1966, the Red Guards raided our family house and threatened the collection of the Beihong Memorial Museum. If you're interested in the details, that would be in chapter 1 of my book, Galloping Horses, about the Red Guards. My mother at the time had no other way to save my father's works, so she wrote to Premier Zhou Enlai asking him to protect Xu Beihong's works in the Memorial Museum. And Premier Zhou immediately sent government workers to come. They packed and moved all the paintings by Xu Beihong and those in his collection in one day. And later on we found out that they were kept in Forbidden City in the Palace Museum, which was under guard throughout the Cultural Revolution. That is how works by Xu Beihong and those in his collection in the Xu Beihong Memorial Museum survived the Red Guards raid. I want to tell you a few things about what happened to other family members, including myself and my brother. By 1966, I had been studying piano performance in one of China's top music schools, the Preparatory Music School affiliated to the Central Conservatory of Music in Beijing. When the Cultural Revolution broke out, classes stopped, and I wondered when my school would be reopened and I will go back to my music studies. But it will be 10 years when all universities, professional art schools, including our conservatory, will be closed and there were no formal teaching. My brother and I were among many young artists and musicians that Mao sent to the countryside to be re-educated. At the 4701 Army Farm, our drinking water was hauled in from a nearby town by an ox-drawn wagon. Farm work was the core of our re-education. We dug irrigation trenches in winter temperature well below freezing. The farm leader's job was to put us through this harsh life in order to push our bourgeois thinking. On the farm, our music students' hands were injured, our fingers lost dexterity. Most of us had been learning to play the musical instruments for 10 years. But on the farm, we were not allowed to practice our instruments. Later on, we were only allowed to practice one hour a day. And here's myself playing the violin on the farm. And you can, if you look carefully, you can see the mud huts that we built in the background and crops. There were no pianos for me to practice. So I managed to get a violin and took violin lessons from college-level students. Their uncertainty about our future was harder on us than the physical stress. We were never told how long we will be working at the farm and when we will be assigned jobs as musicians. Some of my schoolmates gave up the hope of ever becoming a musician again. But some of my schoolmates and I continued our music studies, each in his or her limited way. At that time, it was considered a crime to seek any knowledge besides that found in Mao Zedong's works. But I always kept my father's dream in my heart. My father wanted me to become an educated person and an accomplished artist or musician. I also remembered how my father worked so hard in Europe. He sometimes painted in a German museum for hours without taking the time to eat or drink water. I thought if my father could do that, I could survive this hardship also. I was among the few students on the farm who tried to learn English there. My brother Xu Xingping, you saw that in this book cover, the little boy. He was also on a re-education farm. He continued his study of the French language and painting, and eventually, after the Cultural Revolution, he was able to earn his PhD in art history in University of Paris, Sorbonne. He became the only artist, the painter of the 4 children by my father. My father had wished one of his children would become a painter. So this is one of his, his wish that came true. After the Cultural Revolution, my brother and I started the art school in Renmin University. You probably know Renmin Daxue, one of the top liberal arts universities in China. There had been no art school, but my brother and I started the art school there in year 2000. He became the first dean, and he was dean for 10 years. I was the founding director of the music school. Yeah, we try to continue my father's legacy. My father used to have the Beijing National College, Arts College. We had music and art in the same school, and the music and art students interacted and learned from each other. The Cultural Revolution caused personal tragedies and setbacks for many artists and musicians. However, having lived in the midst of the Cultural Revolution, including the experiences of re-education farms, I believe that some of my schoolmates and I gained in the confidence and perseverance, important qualities for achieving our goals later in our lives. My father once told my mother, "One ought to leave behind for the coming generation something noble and valuable." I'm hoping that the spirit of our family and the stories of other artists and music students under Mao will inspire readers to persist in attaining their own goals. I hope that the people in India would appreciate the freedom and opportunity to love and understand art, and will pursue their careers as passionately as Beihong during his time. If you have any questions, if you don't have time, you can always email it to me, and feel free to get a card from me and look through the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Xu, for that wonderful introduction to life, work, legacy of Xu Beihong, and also for introducing your memoir, Galloping Horses, and finally for your comments on Cultural Revolution, what it meant for China, what it meant for your family. Thanks for that. We have some time now for Q&A. Who would like to start?
No, I mean, I really don't have a question. I was just going to repeat your comment on how wonderful a talk it has been. I was in China during the Cultural Revolution.
Oh, I see.
In fact, I arrived in Peking 1966 and had this, shall we say, terrible experience of seeing what was happening to intellectuals, to artists. As a result, I did not really have an opportunity to see most of the great artists' works. but some were around. And for me, your talk has been an exceedingly educative afternoon, both in terms of your father's Indian experience, of which I knew nothing, forgive my ignorance, and amazing, and your family through the Cultural Revolution. I have had an opportunity sometimes to go back to China after the Cultural Revolution, and as you said, there is a tendency for people to draw a veil of silence over their experience during that time. Actually, I've also served as a diplomat in Germany, and I had that experience of some of the Germans trying to draw a veil of silence of the Nazi period. Just that many of these very fine people, whether in Germany or China, as it were, had no option but to be part of an awful scene. But it is many of us at that time had this feeling that premature life was a force of sanity in the midst of this, and it's so wonderful to learn that your father's works were rescued in this manner and preserved in the Forbidden City. Otherwise, we'd have missed all this tremendous, joyful experience. Thank you.
But many works were destroyed. I saw them being burned in piles.
I did once shake hands with him.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So not your father, but Joe Lai.
Joe Lai, great.
Madam, I wanted to share with you a rather trivial experience that I had concerning a famous painting of your father's, which you've reproduced in your book here, the Figure 2, the Galloping Horse, 1941.
Yeah.
Since about 1964, when I was a first-year college student, I've been an admirer of your father's paintings. When I saw the first one in the home of a former Indian military attaché to your country, to the People's Republic actually. And he told me that this was an original that he had, or a copy. It was I beg your pardon, it was a print of this particular one. Because it had color and the grass and so on is in color in that one. And in subsequent years I began to look around and I gradually found that I was able to see reproductions in various other books of many other paintings. So I became a fan. I did not travel to China for a very, very long time, even though Chinese art fascinated me for years. But in 2014, I was in China and I was looking around for prints of your father's, cheap prints of your father's paintings. And I didn't go everywhere in China looking for them, obviously, only a few places in Beijing and later in Shanghai. But in Beijing, close to the Forbidden City, in one of these narrow streets, I found a small art shop. And the proprietor was an artist, a young man, who was painting himself and obviously making copies of famous Chinese artist pictures to sell to tourists, most of whom were Chinese. So I saw a lot of pictures there and I said I must have a souvenir, a painting from Beijing. And I saw a freshly made copy of your father's painting, which is in the book. So I asked him who did this. So he said, oh, this is my painting. He tells me in English.
Oh.
So I asked him how much and he said 10 yuan.
Oh, okay.
So He actually told me more.
Okay.
So I said, no, but I think that's too much. I mean, because even if it is yours, you're copying somebody. So he said, no, this is mine, my painting. So, and we're speaking in English. So I said, but this is a painting by Beihong. So he says, oh, you are a professor. So anyway, he gave it to me for less. I think he was asking 15, he gave it to me for 10.
Okay.
But I subsequently never found another print. I couldn't find a print anywhere in Wangfujing Street and the main shops there. I didn't find it in that section of shops in Shanghai where there are a lot of art shops which sell prints. And I was surprised that I couldn't find a single print in either of these two cities, nor in not even in around Westlake, where they have a lot of art shops. Westlake in Hangzhou.
Right.
So nowhere could I find one. I haven't looked in Hong Kong, but yes, I have this as a souvenir. I just thought I'd share this with you,
Great.
that there are people copying your father's paintings and proudly claim. And on that he had the inscription.
Yeah.
Not your father's one, but he had the inscription which says, Ma Dao Gong Chen,
Oh, okay.
horses bring success,
Right.
and his own stamp on the thing. That's all I could share. I'm incidentally a horse lover and a rider.
Oh, okay.
I even rode yesterday, but which is another reason why I'm fan. But I love Chinese art and I loved your father's paintings. Thank you so much for this wonderful thing.
Please.
Yeah, please.
So I find some similarity between your father painting horse and M.F. Hussain. M.F. Hussain, our Indian artist. So do you think they were contemporary, had some influence on each other?
Who's that?
M.F. Hussain.
Oh, Hussein. I think Hussein, I said in my talk, he came to China in 1951 and met my father. I just read about this in articles. I was too young to remember that. I was around, but I was maybe 4 years old. But I was told that he came to China and met my father. He also met Qi, another famous Chinese airbrush painter. And he himself, he said that he was influenced by these artists. I looked at his painting of horses. His style was very different from my father's. Perhaps in his composition, he learned something. That's all I can say. It's a very different style. Any other questions?
I had a small question.
Okay.
How is it remembered in contemporary China? Are people studying about him? Or
Can you
his
repeat?
letters? How is it remembered in contemporary China, today's China?
How do I remember?
How people
remember him.
score?
People in China?
Yes.
Yeah.
In today's China,
Yeah.
I see the museum, the big museum. So obviously there are funds been allocated for that. But apart from that, what kind of conversations going on?
You mean the government or the people?
People.
People. I think most people know about Shiva. They all know about his horse paintings. They may not know the details about his life. Young people probably do not know as much as older people, but he's very well known there.
Well, they do teach about Beihong to the grade school children. It's part of the history
Okay.
that they're taught, so they know a little bit.
I think up to maybe 2 years ago, I knew that Beihong was one chapter in elementary school's textbook, and they had a painting on that chapter. Maybe it's not there now, but up to 2 years ago, it had been. I just want to say a few words about history. I mean, in the United States, I have talked to, I have given talks at several universities. What I found out is that the teaching of 20th century history in the United States and even in Singapore, because I gave two talks in Singapore, and I gave one in Hong Kong Chinese University. What I found out is that the teaching of contemporary Chinese history, particularly 20th century, there is a gap. That's the reason why my book has been used by some professors in their teaching of 20th century Chinese history, because there were few writings. Of course, the archives are open now, but how about people? How about people's stories, individual stories, particularly like famous artists, Beihong, and some others. As I said, no children of other major Chinese artists have written books and memoirs about their famous fathers, artists, in English. Nobody did. So you have this gap. Therefore, you know, this book was used by some professors to teach contemporary 20th century Chinese history. And even in National University of Singapore, they don't teach this part of history because they have so few writings about it. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madame Xu, for finding time to come and give this lecture at Institute of Chinese Studies. We benefited immensely from this lecture, kind of insights you provided about Xu Beihong's works, and also about cultural evolution. We really appreciate that. This conversation, I think, needs to be carried forward. I'm happy that you're going to Shantiniketan, where you'll be able to continue research on what Xu Beihong did while he was in India. And as you pointed out, this connection was really strong, and this connection influenced him and influenced Indian artists in turn. I think there's need for better understanding in India and in China of what Xu Beihong did in terms of building this very strong bridge, cultural bridge between our two countries. So thank you very much, and I wish you a very productive stay in India. And can I now invite all of you to join us for a cup of tea in the adjoining room. Thank you.